Welcome to the Let Go and Be Free podcast, a podcast for those who grew up in an alcoholic or dysfunctional family. I'm your host, Ron Vital, author of the Let Go and Be Free 100 Daily Reflections for Adult Children of Alcoholics series. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to visit letgoandbefree.com. And with that, let's get on with the show. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. I wanted to focus on the topic of trust. The title of this episode is Why Is It So Hard to Trust? I was thinking about this a week or so ago, and I thought it would be a good discussion that we could have, on the podcast. I think, again, I don't know each of your individual circumstances. I can't. I can simply say, here's what I've been through, and then you could see if there's any commonality in how you feel, where you are in your life. However, many people that I have spoken to over the decades, those who identify as having grown up in dysfunctional families or grown up with substance abuse within their families, have agreed that trust is a difficult thing, for those people and for myself. So I'll start off with how I feel, experiences where I've come from, and I could share that with you. And then hopefully what I share will kind of help you in the sense that you can identify where I'm coming from, even though if it's not a one-to-one, but then some of what I talk about could hopefully help you move forward in finding trust. So first off, when I think of, why it's so difficult to trust people, I do remember my past, my original family upbringing. There was chaos, there was instability, there was violence, there was anger. And I just remember going through a period where everything would be normal, and then at a snap of a finger, things would just get chaotic. And I never knew when that chaotic time would come. I have memories of there were times, my father would come home from work and things would escalate very quickly. I have one particularly bad memory that has stayed with me. At this point, it's like probably 48 years or 49 years. I just remember this horrible situation and the feeling that went through me of everything was calm, everything was going normal, and then it wasn't. It happened on a dime. It just happened. And my fear reaction went up. I was stunned. I was shocked. I didn't know how to react. It was just a bad scene. And I do remember, and this is something that I have shared, in the past, I remember being out on my big wheel. I can't remember if it's later that same day or very soon after that, but it was a fall day. I remember the leaves being on the sidewalk and me driving my big wheel. It was a 3-wheeler up and down the block. And across the street, I could hear kids laughing and playing. And I was alone and I was in my big wheel. And I remember it was a windy day, it was sunny, it was a beautiful fall day, but I felt like lost and confused, and I just didn't know what to do with all my feelings and everything that I had been experiencing in my family. And I remember hearing those kids again playing across the street, but I didn't have the courage or the strength to go join them. I just stayed on my own. And I think one of the things that has affected me over time is I distrust authority figures. And that obviously is because what I experienced when I was young, when I had, a parent that, was unstable, angry, would yell, would, be angry, and it was just a really difficult time. And that has basically carried through most of my life, where I am distrustful of people and authority. Unfortunately, when you look at the news these days, you could see that many people who do gain power and authority abuse it and abuse others. There are many allegations related to the Me Too movement, many allegations of people who went from nothing to power, and then they just massively abused that power. So for me, I am always keep my arm's length, distance from anyone that I am distrustful of. And that is any relationship in the beginning, especially when it comes to like a work environment. Like, I want to make certain that I can trust whomever the supervisor is, or so really get to know them to make certain that they're not out for themselves and, going to abuse their power. And unfortunately, I have been in different work situations where that was the case, that people just abused that power, and I just didn't trust them. And so I kept to myself and kind of put a wall around myself so that way I wasn't affected by the instability that they were causing. So I understand why, I have that lack of trust. The thing that has been hard for me to process is I can never go back in time. I can never fix what happened back then, when I was a kid. All that lack of trust and things that kind of spurred off of that. There were situations where, again, my mom remarried and then she divorced a second time. And, there was instability of, we lived with my grandparents, and then we moved to an apartment. And then after the divorce, moved back in with my grandparents again. And so there was lots of instability. I went to multiple different schools. It was hard for me to lay down those roots and say, oh, I'm going to make friends here, and then find out a year, maybe 2 or 3 years later, like, oh, nope, we're moving again. Like, that was difficult, as a kid. And so as I got older, I just kind of got set in my ways of I'm just going to protect myself all the time, and I'm not going to let anybody in. That way I'll be safe. That was my thinking at the time. I'm laughing because I learned quickly that, I cannot function all on my own in a healthy way. I need social interaction. I need to be able to have friends. I need to be able to let my guard down. I can't constantly be on my own in the sense of I don't have any type of, interaction with anybody. And I've learned from various studies, especially during the pandemic, things have come out that we as people are social people. And when we don't have interactions with others, even simple basic interactions like talking with a neighbor or a crossing guard, people at a checkout, just saying, good day, hi, I hope you have a good rest of the day. Just simple things like that are good grounding actions for us and for others as we go about our daily, process. Now, when I think of my past and my inability to trust and why it has been so hard, I also realize that the past often can control the present when we let it. We could be in a situation and say, you know what, I'm not going to trust this group or this person. I'm not going to let anybody in because I've seen what happens in the past. I have the receipts. This has happened, that has happened, time after again, boom, bang, boom. I don't want to trust anybody. That's the way it's going to be. That can be a mistake because there's a difference between giving ourselves some time to get to learn and know somebody, and then have a natural, gradual process where we begin to trust someone instead of shields up 100% of the time, we're not going to let anybody in. Now, what I have found interesting is that I've also fallen into the trap of going the opposite way. That if I find someone, especially romantically, that I am attracted to, I could go from being walled in and fine with the world to suddenly head over heels in infatuation and oversharing in a very quick amount of time. That has also caused problems, for me in the past, because I've not given ample time for friendships to form, for infatuation to fade, to be able to see that it's not fool's gold, a particular relationship. It really is, one person getting to know another person over time, gradually, and settling into a solid, healthy friendship. Whereas I have been in relationships went from 0 to 100, and, I'm ready to get married to the person like super quick, and I don't really know them well enough. That has caused some problems for me in the past. And it's a weird thing, because there are times where, again, I don't want to trust anybody. I've been in that circumstance. I'm walled in. But once someone would show, compassion or empathy for me, or reciprocate, attraction back, that kind of melts my defenses, and I would be weak to that and then go all in. And again, there's a difference between, hey, let's take things slow and get to know each other, to suddenly like you're just glued at the hip and you block out everybody else and you spend all your time, all your energy just with this one person. That, for me, I've found to be unhealthy, because I have been in those relationships and, ashamedly can admit that I would discard and ignore my other friends and just focus solely on the romantic relationship. I only had time for the romantic relationship. I didn't even make time for myself. And that's where that lack of trust comes in, because I would realize that I couldn't even trust my own instincts when it came to some attractions that I would have to, another woman, and that I would forget all the stuff I've learned about self-care, forget about, my own needs, and I'd focus only on the attraction, because it felt so good not to be abandoned anymore, to be quote unquote loved and cared for. And that's all that I wanted. And I just simply wanted to focus on that. When I say that now, I kind of cringe a little bit, because I look back at my younger self and be like, dude, you really kind of didn't know what was going on. And instead of focusing on yourself, you gave somebody else power over you, even if they didn't ask for that. And no one can maintain that type of perfect, relationship, in that the highs that you get when you first meet someone and you are falling head over heels in love. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. And then it was important for me to take care of myself, to focus on myself, to understand what my self-care techniques are, to put a boundary between me and other people, because it was necessary for me to first make certain that I was happy, I was focusing on the skills that I needed to make sure that I could get through life in a happy, healthy way, day to day, before I started to focus on, relationship with someone. And I often did it backwards, where I'd be feeling bad and life was low, and I'd find somebody and suddenly think all my problems were solved, and go, again, head over heels into infatuation. And before I know it, the trust that I had built with someone, it would just erode, in front of me, when I realized that either I was being too needy with someone, or constantly seeing each other 100% of the time and being glued at the hip, that both of us weren't taking the time and energy that we needed to focus on ourselves away from each other. And then when we would come back together, we would have, again, a healthy relationship. I failed miserably in this, several times when I was young. I just didn't understand, what was going on. I didn't understand that part of me was trying to sickly replicate the fact that when I was young, I had a father that abandoned me, and I got hurt really bad by that. And I felt like I wasn't loved and cared for. And so I tried to replicate that in relationships that I had, that I would think, oh, now all that past pain that I had, I found someone that won't abandon me, and they're going to fix that little hole in me that I felt since I was a little kid, and everything's going to be great. I mean, I didn't think that consciously, but that's really what was going on at the time. And that realization that I can't just simply put all my energy and effort into a relationship and have nothing left for myself and for friends and for family, that was a really difficult lesson to learn, because the underlying problem was I couldn't trust myself. That once I would feel, attraction towards someone and they reciprocated that I just would go, again, from 0 to 100, and I wasn't able to kind of temper things, slow things down, take a pause and be like, hey, everything okay with me? Everything okay with you? I just was like, all in. And that lack of trust for myself hurt, because I felt good when I was in the beginning of a relationship. And then I would feel so crappy, when things would fall apart. It was like up and down, up and down. And not that this happened, many, many times, but it happened a few times, enough that I was just like, what am I doing wrong? What is wrong with me? And what I didn't understand at the time is that, again, I was trying to fix the past, which was impossible. The only way that I have found to be able to feel comfortable in my skin today is to use different techniques, different skills to help heal myself from the past, to focus on the present, and take care of myself now. And part of that, again, I've said this before, was therapy, going to adult children of alcoholics meetings, visualization techniques, closing my eyes and seeing myself in my family's house when I was young, and as an adult on the outside, walking into the child me and just putting my arms around the child me and being like, hey, I'm here for you. And I know that might sound strange. I've talked about this before, but by doing that, it's the closest that I can time travel and say to my past self, you're going to be okay. We're here in the present, and you feel crappy, the memories of the past, and it's a nice symbolic way of accepting those feelings and moving forward from that. What I've learned about trust over the decades is, like, one, trust with myself, learning how to understand when I go through a difficult time of what my normal reactions are, but building in these like moments of pause to be able to say, hey, am I okay? Doing a check-in. And if I'm not, then I've got a list of things that I can do to be able to help myself. And that could be, hey, I need to check in with a therapist, need to check in with an adult children of alcoholics meeting. I'm going to read through the 12 steps. I'm going to read through the serenity prayer. I'm going to focus on journaling. There's a list of things that I can do that will help me get through that difficult time. And building up those skills has taken time and energy and effort, and frankly, trial and error. It's not something like, oh, look at this, I learned this skill today and now I'm fine. I would work on implementing, that building a boundary or a pause in a relationship to be able to be like, hey, I just need some time for myself, go focus on doing my stuff and come back. And what I mean by a pause, it could be something as simple as like a day or two, instead of 100% of the time being all in with somebody. Like, I needed time to spend with my own friends or with my own family instead of cutting everybody else off and focusing only on the moment. And again, this is just one example of lack of trust. Again, just to share, we might distrust authority figures. We might distrust ourselves. We might distrust our parents that we're still in contact with. Some of those individuals may have been the ones that have harmed us when we were young, and we might, as we're getting older, be asked to take care of those, parents. Life can be extremely complicated, and why it is so hard for us to trust. Once we look back and see what we have lived through, the story is told in our memories. The story is told in the choices that we have made. What we need to do today is to figure out, do we want the past to continue to control us in the present? Can we admit that we are social people, social individuals, and we need to have healthy connection with others? What is that? What does that mean for you? Are you interacting with others each day? Or have you chosen to close yourself up, lock yourself out, so you'll never get hurt again? Unfortunately, that doesn't work, because the more that we block ourselves out, then we become numb, and we may become disenchanted with the world, and we become more withdrawn, and then we deny our feelings. And that doesn't lead to a path of health and happiness. It leads to a path of loneliness, disconnection, and discontent. So the choice that we have, everybody, every day, you can make a different choice. Choice for you is, where do you want to learn how to trust? It might be learning how to trust yourself. It might be learning how to trust the right people. And when I say right, I want to clarify. What I mean by that is, when I was younger, I tended to be attracted to those people who had similar traits to what I saw in my dysfunctional family growing up. And because of that, I would have that quick, friendship or quick romantic attraction. But if I wasn't ready for a healthy, happy relationship, and the other person on the other end wasn't ready for a healthy, happy relationship, then things were doomed from the beginning. What I've learned over time is that people who did not grow up in a dysfunctional family, they can go around and they have like a radar, in the sense that they can look at someone and be like, that's probably not someone that I want to get together with or be a friend with, because, person is giving all the wrong signs. And I just never kind of picked that up when I was younger. Now I can look around and be like, whoa, a lot of drama there. Probably want to stay away from that person. You're able to more easily pick up what is healthy and happy for you. It could be something simple, like someone drinks a lot or is struggling with substance abuse. You might say, you know what, that's going to trigger me from past memories. I'm not going to get romantically involved in that person. It's just going to be a, cyclical replication of my past in the present. I want to do myself a favor and, step out of that. Don't choose to be romantically involved with that person. Again, I'm using an extreme example. But what I have learned is over time to look at those that I'm around and being like, oh, that person is stable. I can see how they act with others. I can see that things are calm. I can see that that person, building a friendship with that person, would be a good thing. And then there are others where you're like, whoa, too much going on there, too many problems and drama and, ups and downs. And it might be a great roller coaster ride, but to build a friendship or relationship with, not going to be a good thing. So what you can do take what I have learned, listen to what I have learned through this episode, and then you can apply it for yourself. You could take this and you could say, oh, I want to talk with a therapist about trust and why I don't trust people and my connections with others. You could write about it in a journal. You could go to an ACOA meeting. There are active things that you can do to help yourself each and every day. I think the important thing to ask is, why is it so hard for you to trust? And then see what comes from that and what answers come from that. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. I appreciate it. I appreciate that some of you continue to support the podcast. And if you wish to continue to do so, please visit letgoandbefree.com. You could either buy me a coffee. It's an online site, make a few dollar donation. You could become a family member of Let Go and Be Free from the Substack, as little as $5 a month, and get the extra monthly podcast episode that comes out that is only for members only. And of course, there are the Let Go and Be Free books. And again, if you Google me or look me up on Amazon or any others, you'll see I've also written 18 fiction novels. Again, if you're like, hey, I've bought all his nonfiction stuff, but I like reading fiction, especially my Cinderella's Secret Witch Diaries. I think I wrote that series. There's 6 books in that series, of fairy tale series, with the eye of what if Cinderella grew up of having, grown up in a dysfunctional family, and the choices that she makes, especially what we're talking about, lack of trust and the focus on her falling so quickly into love, quote unquote love, is something that when I wrote that series, that is a theme that is through the books. The first book is free on all major platforms. You can get it for free. Again, you can check that out. The first book is called Lost, Cinderella's Secret Witch Diaries. And then again, if you want to support the podcast, all sales go back into me paying the bills for the hosting and the website's fees and the podcast service. So again, thank you so much for your time. And as always, please be well.